All right, welcome to the deep dive. We do things a little differently here. You're with us because, well, you want to get smart and you want to do it quickly on a very specific topic. And today we're diving into something pretty fundamental, water.
Yeah, water. We're
Yeah,
looking at it through the lens of the global turbidimeter market.
exactly. And the core resource we're using for this deep dive,
Is the global turbidimeter market report for 2025.
yeah.
So when we say turbidimeter, what we're really talking about, it's almost like a clarity meter for liquids. It's a device that measures turbidity, which is essentially how cloudy a fluid is, due to these tiny, tiny particles suspended in it.
Okay, so,
It's kind of like, when dust gets kicked up in the air and the air looks hazy.
yeah, I see.
It's the same concept, but with liquids. And this is really important when you're checking if drinking water is clean, right? Or if you're monitoring how those wastewater treatment plants are actually working, how effective they are.
Okay, so our mission today is to kind of pull out this key intelligence from this report. And maybe a few surprises, right, for you. And the first thing that jumps out is pretty big. The global turbidimeter market, it's projected to reach $1,240 million US in 2025.
That's a lot of turbidimeters.
Yeah.
But the really fascinating part is where it's headed, the trajectory. The forecast shows this market by 2033 hitting 2098.90 million US dollars.
Wow.
That's a pretty significant increase. It's driven by an expected CAGR. Think of it as the average yearly growth rate over this period of 6.80% between 2025 and 2033. And a major factor fueling this growth, the big engine, is the increasing use of these turbidimeters, these devices, in wastewater treatment plants. As we need to clean up more water, we need more of these devices.
That makes sense. So just to reiterate for those listening, it's a $1 billion plus market set to expand by nearly 7% annually for the next 8 years. And a lot of that is because of this growing focus on cleaning up our water.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm curious, where geographically is all this growth happening? I'm assuming the report breaks things down by region.
Oh, it absolutely does. And currently, North America is holding the biggest piece of the pie, over 37% of the global market share. Their estimated market size in 2025 is going to be around 458.80 million US dollars, with a projected CDR of 5.3% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, and within North America, is it fairly evenly distributed?
Right.
Or is there like one major player?
Well, the United States is definitely the dominant force there. In 2025, they're accounting for an estimated 361.99 million US dollars of that, with a KDR of 5.1%. But Canada and Mexico, they're not slouches. They're showing pretty robust growth as well.
Yeah, what kind of numbers are we talking about for them?
So Canada's market in 2025 is going to be around 55.06 million US dollars, with a KJR slightly higher at 6.1%, and Mexico is sitting at 41.75 million with a CAGR of 5.8%. And what's really interesting here is that the report specifically highlights strict water quality regulations and, the constant drumbeat of technological advancements as the main reasons for North America's dominance, why they're leading the pack and why that growth is sustained.
Okay, so let's jump across the Atlantic, shall we? To Europe.
Right across the pond.
Yeah, exactly. So they're the second largest market with over 29% of the global revenue. In 2025, that amounts to about 359.60 million US dollars.
Yep. And their growth is a bit more measured, 5.9% seats AGR.
Okay. And who are the big players there?
Yeah. In Europe. Well, within Europe, the UK, Germany, and France, they're really the ones to watch. The UK is projected to hit 60.41 million US dollars in 2025, with a pretty strong CGR of 6.7%. And Germany is up there as well at 71.2 million, growing at 6.1%. France is a bit more modest, 33.08 million, with a TGR of 5.1%. And the report really highlights that Europe's, really big on sustainable water management, and that's a huge factor. And they've got this critical need for really precise measurements in certain industries, like chemicals, pharmaceuticals, where accuracy is paramount.
Okay, so Europe's steady, but there's got to be a region out there really taking off, right, in terms of growth rate.
Oh, absolutely. Asia Pacific, we call it APAC. They're the ones with the highest growth rate.
Really?
Yeah, they hold about 24% of the global market, valued at 297.60 million US dollars in 2025. But their CGR, it's a whopping 9.5%.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, and the report points to China, India, and Japan as the major players driving this. So China's market is estimated at 124.99 million US dollars in 2025, with a CJR of 9%. India, while smaller at 29.76 million, boasts an even more impressive PGR, 11.4%. And Japan, well, they're significant too, with a market of 41.07 million and a CAGR of 8%. And the report really emphasizes that the rapid industrialization in these countries and the growing concerns about water purity, those are the big factors pushing this accelerated growth.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in rapidly developing economies, right? There are going to be growing pains. I mean, 11.4% CAGR for India, that's going to be tied to some pretty specific factors, maybe like specific industrial policies they're implementing. It's really fascinating to see how these localized factors play a role.
Yeah.
Now, what about South America? What's happening there?
So they've got over 4% of the market,
Okay.
a size of 47.12 million US dollars in 2025, and a solid CGR of 7.5%.
Okay, not bad. And who are we looking at in South America?
The main players are Brazil and Argentina. So Brazil has a market of $20.17 million with an 8.1% CAGR, and Argentina is right behind them at $7.92 million with a CAGR of 8.4%. The report suggests that this growth is largely due to, just a lot of industrial activity and increased government investment in water treatment, building that infrastructure. Those are creating significant opportunities.
Makes sense. So are we seeing similar trends in other regions like the Middle East?
Yeah, the Middle East is actually quite similar in terms of market share, around 4% with a size of 49.60 million US dollars in 2025 and a CAGR of 8.1%. And Saudi Arabia and the UAE are the ones really driving that growth.
Okay, what are the numbers looking like there?
Saudi Arabia is projected at 17.46 million with a CGR of 8.4%, and the UAE is at 10.22 million with a CGR of 8.6%. And the report points to two major things here: the huge presence of the oil and gas sector, which really needs careful water management, and just the overall growing effort towards, better water resource management in general. Those are the things really pushing the Middle East forward.
Right, it's like a double whammy. The industries they have and the increasing focus on conservation. That's interesting. Okay, what about Africa? Are they on the radar for this market?
Yeah, definitely. They've got about 2.2% of the market with a size of 27.28 million US dollars in 2025 and a respectable growth rate of 7.1%.
Okay, and any specific countries to note?
The report specifically mentions South Africa and Nigeria. South Africa is at 9.60 million US dollars with an 8% CAGR. And Nigeria, a bit smaller at 2.18 million with a 7.3% CAGR. And they're seeing this growth because of increasing industrial activities, things like mining, and just the fundamental need for access to clean water and better wastewater treatment. Those are the key drivers there.
So it's a truly global market, really, with all these different growth patterns.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so beyond just geography, I'm assuming the report dives into different types of turbidimeters, right? Like different categories.
Yeah, it breaks down the market by portability. So it looks at stationary versus handheld turbidimeters.
Oh, okay, so like fixed installations versus portable devices.
Exactly. And the report suggests that those stationary turbidimeters, those fixed ones, they're likely to hold the largest share of the market.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense when you think about it, because they're really crucial in large-scale operations, like municipal water treatment plants or industrial facilities where they need continuous monitoring, high precision. They can't mess around.
Right, it's like the workhorse, the reliable one.
Absolutely. They just offer a greater level of accuracy and reliability for these long-term fixed applications.
So are the handheld devices then more for like specialized situations?
Well, they're definitely more dynamic. The report actually calls the handheld segment the fastest growing segment.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's because of their portability, right?
Yeah.
Imagine a researcher out on a lake or a technician who needs to check water quality at different points in a system. These handheld devices allow them to get quick and accurate readings without having to lug samples back to a lab.
Right, so it's all about convenience and speed.
And accuracy. They've come a long way.
The report also talks about market segmentation by application, like off-field versus on-field.
Yes.
Is that kind of similar to the portability aspect?
It's related, yeah. But it's more about the measurement environment. So off-field applications, those refer to measurements taken in controlled environments. Like think a lab, a quality control lab in a beverage company. Or a research facility where they can, really control the conditions to ensure that the measurements are super accurate.
Okay.
And those off-field applications, they currently hold the largest share of the market. But, on-field applications, those are expanding rapidly, just like we saw with the handheld devices.
So it's that same trend. You need to bring the tool to the water sometimes, not the other way around.
Exactly. On-field measurements, they're all about getting that immediate data in, real-world settings.
Yeah.
Out in the field, it's super valuable for water quality assessments and environmental monitoring.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so we've talked about how the market is divided up geographically by the type of device and the application. But what about the industries that are actually using these turbidimeters?
Oh, yes, the end-use industries.
Right, so who are the biggest customers?
Well, it's probably not going to be a surprise to you, but wastewater treatment, that's the industry with the biggest slice of the pie.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, they have these strict regulations governing wastewater discharge, right?
Hmm.
And they need to continuously monitor water quality at these treatment plants. So turbidimeters they're essential.
Yeah, you're basically making sure that the treated water is actually clean enough to be released back into the environment.
Exactly. They have to meet those safety standards. And
Yeah,
considering the sheer volume of water they're processing, reliable turbidity measurements are just mission critical.
absolutely. Okay, so wastewater treatment is the biggest user, but which sector is growing the fastest in terms of turbidimeter adoption?
That would be pharmaceuticals. The report really underscores this. There's this growing demand for ultra pure water in pharmaceutical manufacturing, and the regulations in that industry are incredibly strict.
Right, everything's got to be sterile.
Exactly. So they need turbidimeters to constantly monitor the water quality and prevent any contamination, because even the tiniest bit of contamination can have huge consequences in drug production. And as the pharmaceutical industry keeps growing, so does their need for these precise measurement tools.
Okay, so we've got the big players like wastewater treatment and the fast-growing sectors like pharmaceuticals, but I'm guessing it doesn't stop there.
Oh, not at all. The report lists a whole bunch of other industries that use turbidimeters.
Like what?
Well, you've got chemicals and materials, oil and gas, pulp and paper, food and beverage, even research and academia, and, a general others category. It really is a fundamental tool across so many different sectors.
Yeah, it seems like any industry that uses water needs to know how clean it is.
Basically, yeah. If water quality impacts either their production process, the final product quality, or, their environmental compliance, they're probably using a turbidimeter.
All right, so we've talked about who's using these devices, where they're being used, and the different types of turbidimeters out there.
Mhm.
But how are these companies actually buying these things? Where are they getting them from?
Ah, good question. The report segments the market by distribution channel. And it says that right now, company-owned websites have the largest market share.
So manufacturers are selling directly to customers.
A lot of them are, yeah. And the report suggests that it's because it gives them more control.
Control over what?
Well, control over things like setting their prices,
Hmm.
providing very specific, detailed product information, and offering, really tailored customer support. Because with a specialized piece of equipment like a turbidimeter, being able to directly address technical questions and build that relationship with the customer, that's really valuable.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like a specialized sales process. But I'm guessing the online market is growing, right? Like the rest of e-commerce.
Oh, absolutely. Online sales are seeing the fastest growth. E-commerce platforms are just, they're so convenient. And they give buyers access to a huge selection of turbidimeters from different manufacturers. So it's easy to compare the specs, read reviews, make an informed decision.
Yeah, you can do all your research right there.
Exactly. And, the ease of ordering and the fast shipping, those are big factors too.
So online sales are booming. What about those traditional offline channels? Are those still around?
The report does mention them, things like specialty stores and other retail stores, but their growth isn't nearly as rapid as the online sector.
Right. It's that same trend across many industries. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the market size, how it's distributed geographically, the different ways the market is segmented. Now, I'm curious about the forces that are driving all this growth. What's making the turbidimeter market expand?
Well, the main factor is pretty clear. The increasing adoption of wastewater treatment facilities, it all circles back to what we were talking about at the beginning.
Right. Clean water is essential.
Absolutely. And as more regions invest in building and upgrading their wastewater treatment infrastructure, to meet stricter environmental regulations, the demand for accurate and reliable turbidity monitoring systems, like turbidimeters, it's just naturally going to increase.
Right.
They're essential for making sure these facilities operate efficiently and meet those required discharge standards.
Okay, so that's the big one. What else is driving this growth?
Well, the report highlights two other important factors: the rising global awareness of waterborne diseases
Hmm.
and just, a general increase in understanding the importance of water quality. They're really fundamental shifts.
People are more aware of the risks now.
Exactly. So, as public awareness grows about the health risks associated with contaminated water and the vital role clean water plays in our lives, the need for technologies that can effectively monitor and safeguard water quality, like turbidimeters, it's going to keep expanding. And it's going to expand across all sorts of applications, from making sure our drinking water is safe to maintaining standards in industrial processes.
So it's not just about treating wastewater, it's about ensuring water quality across the board.
Precisely.
Okay, now, let's flip the coin. What are some of the things that might be holding back market growth?
Well, one restraint that the report mentions is high manufacturing costs. These turbidimeters, they're pretty sophisticated devices, and producing them requires a lot of research and development and precision manufacturing. So those costs can impact affordability and how quickly they're adopted, especially in more price-sensitive markets or in developing regions.
Right, so the technology itself is a bit of a barrier. What else?
Another factor is simply slower adoption rates in certain markets.
Okay, and why is that?
It could be a number of things. Maybe there's just a lack of awareness about the benefits of using turbidimeters in certain areas, or, maybe there are budget limitations within certain industries or geographical areas. It could also just be that, the implementation and enforcement of water quality regulations is slower in some places.
Right, so there are a lot of potential hurdles. All right, so we've looked at the drivers and the restraints. What about the future? What are some of the trends that are going to shape the turbidimeter market going forward?
Well, technological advancements are definitely going to be a major factor. The industry is constantly innovating.
Are there any specific examples?
Yeah, actually, the report mentions a couple. So, Tintometer GmbH, they introduced a portable infrared turbidity measuring device back in November 2021. And then there's Xylem company YSI. They launched these advanced handheld meters in July 2020. These new devices, they're more user-friendly, more accurate, and they can be used in a wider range of situations.
So it's all about making them better, easier to use, more versatile.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And we're also seeing a lot of integration with what's called the Internet of Things. So you can have remote monitoring. That's going to be a big trend to watch.
Okay, so the tech is evolving. What about the bigger picture?
Well, those increasing concerns about water contamination and its potential health effects, those are a major trend too. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people are worried about water quality, the more demand there is for even more sensitive and reliable turbidity monitoring solutions.
Right, so the problem is fueling the solution. Okay, so last question. Who are the big players in this market? Who's making all these turbidimeters?
The report describes the competitive landscape as, and I quote, highly competitive.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, there are a lot of companies, both global and regional. Some of the big names include Equalytic, DKK Corporation, Hatch Company, Henna Instruments, and there are many, many other specialized manufacturers as well. And these companies, they're all competing on different things: the range of products they offer, how well their instruments perform, their pricing strategies, how they get their products to customers. It's a really dynamic landscape.
So it sounds like it's an industry that's constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
All right, so to wrap things up for everyone listening, you now have a pretty comprehensive view of the global turbidimeter market. It's a big market, and it's growing. It's projected to reach 1,240 million US dollars in 2025 and keep expanding to almost 2.1 billion by 2033. And a big chunk of that growth is fueled by the increasing focus on wastewater treatment worldwide.
Yeah, and we've also looked at how this market is distributed geographically. North America is leading the pack right now, but Asia Pacific is showing the most potential for growth. And we've seen how the market is divided up by the portability of the devices, how they're used, the industries that rely on them, and how they're sold.
Right. It's fascinating to see how all these different factors play a role.
Absolutely.
And we've discussed the major drivers of this growth, things like the investment in wastewater treatment and the growing awareness of water quality issues. And we also talked about some of the things that could slow things down, like high manufacturing costs and those varying adoption rates across the world. Plus, we touched on how technological advancements and those ongoing concerns about water contamination are going to shape the future of this market, all within this really competitive landscape of global and regional players. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But the key takeaway here is that when you hear that initial figure, that 1,240 million US dollars for the market in 2025, you now have a much deeper understanding of what that number actually represents. all the complex factors, all the regional dynamics that contribute to it, and what that means for the future.
Exactly. And to leave you with one final thought, you know, given the increasing global focus on protecting our water resources
Yeah.
and all the environmental regulations popping up everywhere, how might further innovations in turbidimeter technology, beyond just the market size, how might they really influence different industries and even public health in the years to come?
Yeah, think about it.
Think about the practical implications, the societal benefits of being able to monitor the clarity of our water with ever-increasing precision. It's a far more critical and intricate field than it might seem at first glance.
Absolutely. It's all about the water.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.